All right. Well, we've got a bunch of people here. Maybe I should ask you. You recently wrote that writers bring more value to the world than software developers. Do you feel the same way about the writer of uh, a crazy manifesto who also shot a guy, allegedly, Luigi Mangione?
Oh, leading with Luigi, I do want to clarify that I said in a recent Substack live that writers, in some cases, bring more value to the world than software developers. And then you turned it into a clickbait headline to drive subscribers for your Substack, which you're trying to turn into a cultural force. Even though my true opinion was marginally more nuanced than that stated headline. Luigi. Okay, so what was the question? The question wasn't a question. The question was just talk about Luigi, wasn't
Yes.
it? Luigi, one of the famous. It's very interesting to see how much focus he's getting compared to the revolution that's going on in Syria for now. That story, which is has bigger implications, is a true geopolitical significant story, is getting very little play compared to the guy who shot the United Healthcare CEO in the streets of New York. But it's a soap opera, I think, and people are super into the soap opera, and mainstream media is all over it. But it is very interesting that they chose not to publish the quote unquote manifesto, despite having it, despite there being plenty of interest in it. And it was left to Ken Klippenstein, a Substack independent, a Substack based independent journalist, to publish it. I talked to him a little bit about it over text. He said he hasn't got any blowback at all. Only people uh, saying good job for doing it. I think it's probably good that it's on the record. I'm sure some people will take the other point of view, but I'm glad that there are independent journalists who can um, take on the risk of doing something like that in the interest of public discourse when other institutions in the mainstream media aren't doing it. And I also think it's kind of interesting that culture has kind of developed to a point where the mainstream media institutions aren't publishing that stuff. They did publish the Unabomber manifesto back in the day on the basis of it being in the public interest. So without making a strong statement in favor of like good or bad that it's being published. I think it's very interesting that the mainstream media haven't published it and that it took a
Yeah.
Substack based independent journalist to do it. And I think it's good that there is this kind of core uh, cohort of independent journalists who have that power now to get it into the public discourse.
Yeah, I buy that. I think it helps a lot that it was so awful and stupid. Like the Unabomber Bomber Manifesto, I think there's a history of people reading that thing and being like, "Ah, geez, this guy has a point." Uh, this one's pretty. I guess there's still going to be people that do that, but you have to be pretty thick. I think it was not. It was not. It was not super well argued to my mind.
It was actually it undermined his more effective and more poetic written protest, which came in the form of the three words he wrote on the casings of the bullets that he used to kill that guy. I can't remember what the exact order or exact words, but defend, deny, depose, whatever it was. Um, he probably, if we're critiquing this guy from his communicate from for his communication strategy, then maybe not having a manifesto would have been the zag move to do here, and just letting those bullet casings do the talking would have been a
Yeah.
smarter thing.
I think it's still true that it would be defensible to publish the manifesto, even if it helped him. Even if this horrible murderer was doing this thing and then publishing the manifesto you know furthered the cause. I think there's still a very strong case to be made that there's a journalistic public interest thing. I think it gets spicier, but I think you're right. I think in this case it's the refusal to do that would have helped him. I think I agree with you. The manifesto undermines the thing, and so I think it's maybe less. at least to me, it feels like a less complicated question than it might otherwise have been.
Yeah, it's
Like if it was
interesting.
a genius, persuasive manifesto, I think there's still a good case to publish it. But I don't think that's what, in my judgment, that's not what we're not what we're dealing with here.
It was really interesting that he started it by saying, I'm going to keep this short and sweet, not going to waste your time." Because if you've gone to that trouble to make a statement, it seemed to be like a statement murder, a statement assassination. You sort of want to. I would have guessed you would want to maximize the stage you have, the time in the spotlight you have. I guess it further confuses the issue for why he acted in that way, why he did this
Yeah,
extreme thing.
I think the point you raised earlier is a really good one too, which is it's very interesting to me how fascinated we all are with this thing right now. And I mean, I include myself in this. I'm kind of like I'm gawking. I can't look away. But it's what does it say? What does it say that this is the thing that sort of like captivated at least my timeline's attention? Why is this? And why? Like, it seems to me that it's there seem to be so many people that are like getting a thrill from this, and some of them are like retroactively coming up with some political justification for why, or like sometimes quite, to my mind, ridiculously. But it does seem to be like just captivating people and fascinating them, and like this unlook awayable story right now. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a reflection of kind of Twitter culture or social media culture where everyone is obsessed with the current thing. And I see that, yeah, maybe it's good and maybe it's bad. I'm not sure. Like maybe this is the way culture gets figured out. But the Twitter feed or the social media feed is optimized for uh, highly emotional, reactive responses and people congregating around memes and not none of that has anything to do with what is the most important political or geopolitical or whatever what's the most important news story at the time. um it has a lot to do with drama and entertainment and tribalism and people dividing themselves into sides over a certain issue and then going to war over them from their keyboards. I think you can sort of see aspects of the like new political regime in the US is reflecting that as well. The Trump cabinet, the rollout of that cabinet, no comment on the quality of the appointments or anything like that. But it is a cast of characters from Twitter or X. And the people who are sort of held up as representative of the political shift in the United States at the moment, uh, people who are being noisy on Twitter, on X, and they are sort of being emboldened by the support that they've got there, and being emboldened by the vote working out in their favor this time. And so I think there is kind of an illusion of those people and their opinions holding the political salience, um, holding political salience, but that might act that doesn't actually represent the big stories of our time perfectly, and the big issues that people are facing on the ground in the world and in the
Yeah.
everyday lives. There's
I
like
think
it's a
mm,
simulation.
I agree with you that it has a salience outside of its sort of like immediate importance, immediate impact. I think I disagree that we can put that on X or on any particular social media. Like I saw that on my Substack, both in the feed and in publications. I think it's, I'm actually haven't been watching the news, but I assume it's on the news too. I think it's human nature. I think this is something that's like it's something that captures the imagination, uh, captures people's attention, is this thing you can't look away from, whatever your judgment of it. It's one of these things that kind of just like presses people's buttons. And the whatever media we follow it on is going to be sort of a reflection of that. And the I don't think you can blame the technology for the way that the effect this has on people.
No, no, no. I agree. I agree with that. People are going to be attracted to stories like this, regardless. Like John Benet Ramsey is a good example from like a previous era. But the media it interacts with can amplify and intensify the level of interest in these like storylines and determine to some extent which stories win and which stories die or lose. And the Syria revolution is really interesting. I have seen a bit of that, like people going into like the torture camps and the prisons and things like that in Syria, and so, like shots, like stories of like from scenes of um, celebration or like violence on the streets. Um, but the extent to which it's also like localism, right? Like the we live in the US, you and I do, and the news we're paying attention to is sort of US centric, and the CEO assassination is a US story happened in New York, so all that makes sense to me as well. But uh,
Also, I mean, I am a CEO and I subscribe to a lot of the same Substacks as this guy. It's sort of, and I think there's like he was a privileged school guy. Like I think there's sort of like a social proximity that a lot of people in our world feel.
yeah, and it's a very current thing story. So it's like it's prime. We're primed to like be interested in humans are primed to be interested in the story, and the dominant media apparatus is primed to make sure it never leaves our minds for a second in the day. And that is a I think you know what I'm saying as I say this shit. I start to doubt myself. Like the John Benet Ramsey story that I just mentioned was a kind of like global within the US phenomenon because the way broadcast television worked those days, in those days, it was like a one story, everyone is saying, pay attention to this. So our experience of the Luigi story is particularly because of the Substack angles, because of the like social salience, might be all intense and all consuming, but there are probably like other parts of the country that are maybe a little bit less into it. I'm
Well,
not
and here we
sure.
are.
Not
Here
sure
we
where I'm
are
going with that.
contributing to everybody paying attention to it by talking about it. The lesson is don't kill CEOs. If we've learned one thing, that's bad to do.
Hell, I mean, this guy. No, don't do it. Don't do that. Terrible idea. But in terms of getting cut through for your like political statements, that has proven to be more effective than some of the other grisly acts in recent American history.
It would be even better though as a chief writing officer. If you could find one of those, I think that would really just amplify it to the max.
Just target those guys. Yeah, yeah.
I want to ask you about another thing you wrote recently about on the company on Substack Reads, I think, or on one of our blog, one
Yeah,
of our Substack properties,
yeah.
which is the looming possibility of a TikTok ban actually materializing. When I kind of like scanned the poly market odds for these things, and I think last time I checked it was sort of like a 33, roughly a third chance of TikTok actually getting meaningfully banned before kind of May next year. What did you have to say in that piece?
In that piece, I sort of putting aside the question of whether or not it's right for TikTok to be forced to abandon the US. The the control and power that platforms like TikTok have over online creators, writers, publishers, whatever you want to call them, is a bad spot for those people to be in. And the prospect of TikTok disappearing for those creators who have built their audiences and to a large extent their livelihoods on that platform just highlights that how tenuous their fates are when they're in the hands of these aggregators that ultimately own the relationship between their audience and the creators. So it's more like through the prism of this particular story, we can see how the business models of the previous decade, which might as well be the previous century, um, aren't working in favor of writers, creators, publishers. And that's the internet needs to shift to a different model that does give them ownership, that does give them a way to make money directly from their audiences as well, preferably. And that this should be table stakes for the new internet. You shouldn't, no creator worth their salt should think about entrusting their audience to a platform who might do anything with it, who might change their rules of operation at any time, who might decide to like kick them off the platform for any arbitrary reason, who might go under because they get banned by the US government. And I think this is a big thing for not just like creators in the internet era, but for like creative people throughout the history of time. If you can't have a direct relationship with your audience, then you're vulnerable to outside forces. You're vulnerable to that being taken away from you. And until the internet, it was kind of hard to have and retain and make good income from that direct relationship. But the internet is actually pretty amazing in that it opens up all these opportunities to have a retained relationship with an audience that cares about your work. It's just that the business models haven't been the right business models haven't been pointed at that until kind of Patreon and Substack, and even Patreon has a like kind of messed up version of it just because of the era in which it was born.
Yeah, I've always thought about it primarily as exit rights, where, if you're on Substack, there's various reasons why we want to build the platform to your advantage, and we want to help you get subscribers, and we want to help you make money because that's how we make money. But ultimately, you are placing some trust in the company, in the platform while you're here. And the most effective backstop you can have for that is, do you have the ability to leave should you want to? Whether that's, because Substack turns evil or Substack goes under or whatever. There's just any kind of like divergence of, you know, do you actually have some means to contact your audience? Is that part of the social contract of the platform? Do people expect that? Because it's not. I think it has to be baked into the fabric of the platform. Where it would be weird if I one day started, people that I've had seen a video of on TikTok were able to reach me in some strange way. That's kind of like not even how I expect that thing to work. But having, a direct relationship and having that be, the right to take that with you as one of the building blocks for Substack feels like, people sometimes would used to criticize
Yeah.
us for doing that as
You're
like
not doing
a,
enough lock-in. These guys
yeah, it's like as a
can
bad
they can
business
leave
decision, but
anytime they want.
I think it's actually a good business decision because it puts the right pressure on us, and it's like a credible signal of trustworthiness.
Yeah,
It means that we can't do the things that would you know trank people away. But I wanted to ask you, do you think that, given that we're talking about TikTok and is happening the next 5 months, do you think that Substack is a viable place to spend time as a TikToker?
especially for the smartest ones, especially for people who want to get good culture and care about what they're putting into their brain. And there are many millions of smart people who use TikTok who do want that. And there are many creators who are on TikTok who are incredibly good at making stuff and producing culture that other people want to be part of. Yes, I think Substack is good. Just taking that creator lens, yes, I think you need a home on the internet where your communities can gather, where you can own the direct relationship with the audience, where you're in control, where you can get paid directly. And in that case, they can think of Substack as their anchor, as their home base, and then start to turn these powerful social media tools, which are still fun to be on, still great ways to reach audiences, into like a service for their home on the internet. With TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and X and the likes, LinkedIn can become places that you use to reach a huge number of people and siphon them back over to the place where you can control the relationship with them and where you can actually like build a business of them. But part of this is about trust. I wanted to tie it into something I was going to interrupt you with before, and the reason it's important to have exit rights where you own your mailing list, you can export it anytime you want. Same with your content, is you're building effectively even you're building a business on Substack. And even if you don't have paid subscriptions turned on, Like it might be a future business. Lots of people start off thinking they're never going to go paid, and then like it goes so well, they eventually come around to the idea of flicking on paid subscriptions, and it starts to change their lives, and they build and build and build. And for as long as you're building a business on a platform, you want to make sure that you trust that platform. And the writers in particular, when we started Substack in 2017, had seen what happens when they're not in control and when they do defer to platforms um, and are subservient to their rules. So in the large media organization category, there are the likes of BuzzFeed and Vice and Mike and Babe.net, which kind of
What was the last one?
Babe.net.
I don't remember that one.
That's a deep cut. It's just for the people, the media nerds among us. They're like they did a they canceled. They did the story that got Aziz Ansari canceled, but they'd previously been growing like gangbusters based on Facebook traffic. As soon as Facebook decided in 2018 to deprioritize news because it was leading to all sorts of problems post-election and prioritize instead interactions between people, then those publications that I just listed, the Vices and the BuzzFeeds of the world, got massively hit. But also for individual writers and bloggers and small magazines, they had a miniature version of this when they were seduced to join Medium. I'm not trying to bash the current incarnation of Medium. There's lots of people care deeply about writing and publishing and trying hard, um, and have made a good thing there. But in those earlier days of Medium, Medium built beautiful publishing tools, wonderful design, a great platform, and attracted a bunch of writers and magazines and blogs, sometimes with money. Sometimes they just paid them directly, like they were paying, giving them salaries or grants. But Medium had built this beautiful tool set and beautiful platform without figuring out a business model. So when it came time to figure out how Medium could make money so they could keep this platform running and keep paying the people that had been paying, uh, they kept on trying different models. And each time it failed, the writers and the blogs and the magazines that had bet their futures on them on Medium were burned in the process, and they were screwed because they didn't have an audience they could export from Medium and just start over again on some other platform. That was all locked up in Medium. And so by the time Substack came along, all that stuff was fresh in people's minds. And it was really important to restore trust, especially as like a Silicon Valley company, a venture capital funded Silicon Valley technology company coming along promising to save the media. It wasn't exactly like a strong position to be coming from. So giving people the trust by showing that you understand what's important to them and their businesses and what's important to them and their creative work was just a fundamental precursor to us even being able to get off the start line. So without them being able to own their content and own their mailing lists, I don't think Substack would even be here. I don't think it would have got off the ground. And um, I think it's going to be the standard for all media platforms from now on, and all social media platforms from now on. If you're not able to own your audience, then people won't trust you. They don't, and you don't deserve their trust.
I like how you still say venture capital like a curse word.
Well, I don't think it's a curse word, but I think that people in the media and a lot of writers, having seen those experiences in the mid 2010s, came to view venture capital skeptically. I don't think necessarily for the right
Yeah.
reasons, but for understandable reasons. Like a lot of things that had gone bad, that had given them hope and then turned out to burn them, had uh, had been VC funded businesses using the VC playbook for growth, and with lots of grand promises of tech saving the world that's often associated with VC. So it's not like completely unwarranted, but ultimately, yeah, I don't. I think it was the wrong,
Yeah.
the wrong person or entity to blame.
Skepticism warranted. No, I
Yeah,
agree with you. And I sometimes think of the analogy of, you know, internet internet platforms like polities, like a city or like a cult, like a country. Um, and a country that doesn't let people leave is not a good country. Simple as that. Uh,
yeah. no matter how shiny their theme parks, no matter how good their malls. Mm. And countries that don't let people say what they want to say also should be skeptical about those countries.
Many, many of those these days.
Yeah.
Anything else we should hit? I heard a lot of people, or I saw a lot of people complaining that we were frozen, and I was wondering if I should go bug Zach and show him. But it looks like
Oh
people went and
yeah.
came back, and it worked.
I can't see the. What I want to do is go and read. Hopefully, Zach's watching. Product manager for Substack Live. When the comments roll in, and I'm too focused on you, Chris, or what I'm trying to say to like read every comment, and I want to go back and read them after the show, or like for them to be preserved and like edited and compiled for us to publish when we publish the video later on if we ever get around to that. Yeah, Zach, hey, can you make it so that we can see comments even after we're done the episode? Because I'm sure these brilliant viewers of these, what was it, 185,000 people in here now. I think they must have, many of them must be saying some genius things, and I want to enjoy that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Hamish, and thank you for to everyone who tuned in. I'll be doing some more lives, so watch this space.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.